We're recording.
That is a miracle.
Um,
You know how to press a button, Joe. I'm deeply impressed.
well, thank you, William, and it's lovely to be having this joy conversation with you. We've Our paths have crossed. We've known each other sort of for a little while now, 10 years. A little while, um, uh, and um, among other things, you were founder of Alternatives.
One of them,
And
yes.
one of them, and your current big sort of focus, among other things, but it's a big focus, is the Spiritual Companions.
Spiritual Companions Trust. Yeah, it's an
Spiritual
educational charity, and a lot of my energy's there.
Great. And you've written lots of fantastic books, one of which I have particularly enjoyed, The Endorphin Effect. I loved that. Um,
Thank you.
and it's all very relevant in a way to this theme of joy, because, um, as you know, there are the two questions that I'd love to ask you about joy. And the first one, of course, is, what is joy to you? What does joy mean to you?
You know, it's just to tell everybody who's listening. Before we actually started recording, we were discussing which were the funniest Netflix shows to watch. Um, so listen, Joe, I get quite conflicted when you ask me what is joy to me, because I'm very aware that there's a spectrum of type of people, right? And some people are naturally on this spectrum, they're upbeat, the glass is half full, right? And some people on this spectrum, the glass is half empty, and they have tendencies towards melancholy and depression, right?
Yeah.
And those two types of people will talk in different ways about joy, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm really fortunate. Good karma, good DNA, I don't know what it is, but I start off my life up this end of the scale, which is I'm a happy boy. I
Great.
was born a happy little creature.
Fantastic.
I was born happy and confident, and with maybe too much confidence that verged on arrogance and pomposity and all that, you know, that kind of stuff, which I've had to work through. But I remember being just vitalized and joyful because life is life, you know. And I remember as a kid just looking at the blue of the sky and going, wow, kapow, you know, just amazing. It's just amazing, right? And I had a sense too, and I don't want to be precious or earnest about it, but I had a sense too as a child that there was this wonderful vitality, energy, aliveness, beingness about the sky and the cosmos. Some people call it God. I didn't like the word God because that always came from people who were, because I went to an English private school where the head teacher talked about God, and it was just awful when he talked about God, and his wife talked about God, and she was even worse when she talked about God, but because I had this experience of the sheer brilliance of life, right?
Yeah.
And I've had to kind of contain it so as not to be intrusive and not to insult people who are in a state of melancholy, right? Because
Yeah.
somebody in a state of melancholy sees me there like a great big poodle with its tail wagging, you know, it's inappropriate, right?
Yeah.
So joy for me is a natural state of being that links with the sheer exuberance of life. Now, in the middle of that, let's be clear, I am also a highly strung, neurotic little shit occasionally, you know? It's just, I'm human, right? But it's contain the way I work on myself, work on my patterns of negativity and neurosis and all the rest of it, is framed by this sense of joy, by this sense of connection. So where I also get joy, and this is probably very similar to where you get joy, right? Where I also get joy is being in processes with individuals and groups where they're opening up to that connection with the vitality and exuberance of life. So I've often said, I'm not much of a gardener, in terms of plants and trees and all that, and shrubs and all that kind of stuff. And people go, "Oh, well, you like gardening?" And I would say, I like gardening people. I love being in groups or individuals, but both as educator, facilitator, and as participant. I love it when people are opening up to feel the sheer vitality and exuberance of life and some joy. And to those who suffer melancholy and depression, I go, I understand, you have all my love and compassion and support, and let's have a little taste of joy as well. Let's start to mix it in. Let's start to mix it into your melancholy and lighten it up as best we can with due sensitivity to whatever trauma or suffering you've endured. Let's just link you into the joy that's in the cosmos, in the universe, and let's see if we can bring things back into a more enjoyable flow. So that's me and joy.
Fantastic. I've sort of heard, there are a number of things that I've heard in the conversation. One is that sense of wow, looking up at the blue sky and having the sense of kinds of wow at the vastness of it all, and also a sense of an appreciation of the great good fortune that sort of you've experienced by being here and being alive, and also being able to share that with others. It's your gardening analogy, gardening people, helping people flower. It's all, these are key things that I heard in what you were saying, and therefore, in a way, I feel that so implicitly you have answered the second question, which is kind of how important is it to you? Because everything that just exuding, emanating from you when you were talking was this is you, this is your life, this is what it's all about, this is kind of why you're here, this is so what you do, and William, it's all very lovely.
Do you have a but in there? No, because I have a but, right? So my but is that I have had to be careful not to have that exuberance feed self-centeredness. I've had to be careful that exuberance and joie de vivre and connection with spirit doesn't become narcissistic. And that's one package. Another package is I've had to learn socially to contain myself. And I remember in my 30s having this realization that I had to stop being so friendly to people I immediately liked because it was intrusive for them. They were overwhelmed by it, especially English and Scandinavians, who are kind of, and so I've had to guide myself quite carefully into noticing what's appropriate in different types of situation, actually. And
yes.
Because otherwise, I mean, there were two sides to it. It was triggering and offensive for some people who just didn't know how to handle it or had their own sadness to deal with. And on the other hand, it often, I don't know whether you experienced this, it often actually triggered an aggressive response for people, and I was vulnerable because bullies would kind of just see someone who was nice and open and be they'd have a sniff of something they could attack. So I've
Yes.
had to learn how to be balanced about it. So it's like that Arabic saying about trust in Allah but tether your camel. Right?
Yes, I love that one too. Yes.
So I completely experience the joy, and I have daily spiritual practice and meditation where I spend an hour or so just soaking in that connection. And then in my life, like everybody else, I try and steer myself so that it's useful and appropriate socially and in my relationships. And that's a learning process for me.
Fantastic, William. That I think is a very inspiring message, that you see that you come with all this, and it needs to be practical and useful and grounded and appropriate, so that it can be received by people at a time when we need to receive that kind of vibe.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want to be, if you go into an intensive care unit, or you go into a hospice, or you go into a casualty ward, you're going to need to be as careful as a horse whisperer,
Yes.
You're going to need to assess carefully how somebody described me, it was one of the nicest compliments I ever had, actually, a couple of days ago when they were watching me work. They said, "Oh, you're like a soul whisperer."
Very nice.
And I think it's for people who are naturally exuberant, we have to be appropriate so that we do soul whispering and work appropriately with our fellow beings.
How fantastic. Soul whisperer, a joyful soul whisperer.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, William, it's been absolutely lovely having this conversation with you.
Yeah, you too. You look lovely, especially in your wonderful hat.
I tell you something about this hat. It's a great hat because you can take it off, you can scrunch it up, you can put it. It's
in your pocket.
In a pocket, exactly.
What's it made of?
Oh, I don't know, so hemp or something like that.
Yeah, fantastic.
So
it works for you.
Yes, good. William, lovely. Thank you very, very much indeed. A fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you too for a lovely conversation, Joe. Blessings.
Okay. Thank you.